World. Let's dive into the headlines this hour. Convicted Epstein associate Ghislaine Maxwell told US officials that a much-rumoured client list does not exist, according to a transcript of her July interview. She said she never witnessed misconduct by President Donald Trump or Bill Clinton, and she called claims against Prince Andrew not conceivable and is also seeking a pardon from the president, while also facing accusations of lying to federal officials. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accuses Moscow of doing everything it can to avoid a meeting with Vladimir Putin, despite US efforts to broker talks. Donald Trump, who met both leaders this week, called the war his toughest challenge yet, while Russia's Sergei Lavrov insisted Putin is ready only if a proper agenda exists. President Trump warned he could impose massive sanctions or massive tariffs on Russia if there is no progress towards peace in Ukraine within the next 2 weeks. The threat comes days after his meeting with President Putin in Alaska as Trump signals growing frustration with Moscow. Hamas has denounced Defense Minister Israel Katz's warning that Gaza City will be destroyed if the group does not disarm and free all hostages, calling his words a confession of ethnic cleansing. The comments come as Israel approves plans for a massive assault on Gaza City, even after Hamas approved a Qatari-Egyptian ceasefire proposal. Texas lawmakers have approved a new electoral map creating 5 Republican-leaning districts aimed at helping the party retain control of Congress in next year's midterms. A Democratic filibuster attempt was blocked by a Republican procedural move, and the plan now awaits the governor's signature. Bosnia's Serb statelet Republika Srpska will hold a referendum on October the 25th, challenging the federal court verdict against its president Milorad Dodik, who was convicted in February of undermining Bosnia's post-war order. Dodik avoided prison by paying a $22,000 fine, but was banned from office for 6 years, yet he vows to defy the ruling. Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung have reaffirmed security cooperation, stressing the importance of their trilateral alliance with the United States. The talks come ahead of Lee's Monday summit with the US President. Pakistan's National Disaster Management Authority has issued a warning stating that a 7-kilometer lake formed by a mountain mudslide in Gilgit-Baltistan cloudburst could trigger catastrophic floods downstream. The mudslide blocked the main Gidza River channel on Friday, creating a growing water body, now posing a severe risk to communities. We start in West Asia this hour, where Iranian Defense Minister Aziz Nasir-Zadeh has claimed the Islamic Republic has built infrastructure to produce weapons in several countries. Nasir-Zadeh has said missile development has been a top priority, but added that after the war with Israel, priorities may change. He also added the factories are expected to be formally opened and publicly announced in the near future. According to reports, Iran is seeking help from Belarus to rebuild its defense capabilities damaged during the 12-day war with Israel in June. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko met Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian in Minsk earlier this week. While official talks focused on economic ties, Ukrainian intelligence said Tehran sought help to repair its air defense and electronic warfare systems. We're now joined by Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst and he joins us live from Taipei, Taiwan. Ross, thank you very much for joining us. Ross, we all saw the 12-day war with Israel unfold. If you can, currently, give us a little bit of an insight into Iran's military capabilities as they stand after the 12-day war with Israel. What are they capable of now?
Their capabilities are still strong. One of the things that's a matter of debate is
Okay, we seem to have some network issues there with Ross Feingold. We are currently discussing the Iranian defense program, and if Iran still has its military capabilities and claims that it is building weapons abroad. We seem to have fixed that network issue now. Ross joins us once again. I'm going to phrase that question to you once again, Ross. Iran's military capabilities, what are they still capable of after we saw that much destruction done by Israel during that 12-day war?
The interesting thing there is the United States and Israel have made a number of claims about the bombing campaign's ability to degrade Iran's nuclear weapons development program, but they very rarely talk about any degradation of Iran's conventional weapons programs, including missiles, where, to be frank, Iran has developed a fairly capable ability to produce both missiles with very long ranges, as well as drones with very long ranges. So one of the things that, frankly, as analysts of Iran's military capabilities that we don't know is what is Iran's current conventional military capabilities, and specifically their ability to export that.
Yes, and now, Ross, Iran's defense minister has said that it has built infrastructure to produce weapons in several countries. It hasn't cited who. Who can you tell us who are Israel's closest friends on the global stage that could possibly have something to do with Iran rebuilding its weapons capabilities, etc.?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question for Israel. If we go back 5 or 6 years ago, Israel had developed very good relations with Russia, and Israel had also developed very good relations with China as well. With regard to Russia, there were a lot of immigrants from Russia living in Israel, but maintained close ties to Russia. Russia was very interested in Israeli technology exports. And with regard to China, Israel had developed a very close relationship with China in the information technology and semiconductor space. So there was a growing relationship there as well. When Iran talks about its ability to provide weapons or produce weapons in other places, the immediate thoughts that come to mind are places like China and Russia, and whether or not they're going to continue to cooperate with Iran. So it's definitely something worth watching. Part of this also is probably bluffing by Iran as well. I mean, they've been hit so hard economically because of international sanctions. They were humiliated by the Israeli and U.S. bombing campaign as well. So part of this is just for domestic consumption in Iran. And what is Iran's real capabilities at the moment? I think that remains to be seen.
Ross, thank you for that detailed analysis. You are staying with us to discuss more updates from West Asia. We now move to the region's defining crisis, where Palestinians in Gaza City surveyed the damage after an Israeli airstrike destroyed homes. Residents say the army warned them to evacuate, and no casualties have so far been reported at the site. Thousands have fled as Israeli tanks move closer to Gaza City. Israel's Security Cabinet, chaired by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, approved a plan to seize the city, despite calls from allies to reconsider. Listen in to what some of the residents had to say.
قاعدين عادي في شغلنا، جانا تعميم انه في اقلاع للحاره كلها. جينا خلينا عيالنا واولادنا. بعد بنص ساعه قالوا ما يهتمش حد في الموجود في المنطقه كليتها. تم ضرب دار شو اسمه جياب. وزي ما انت شايف ما ضلش ولا بيت ولا دار سطح ولا دار تانك ولا ضل اي حاجه في المربع كله. قاعد تشريح غزه، هو ايش ضل في غزه اساسا؟ ما ضلش فيها غزه حاجه، لغار البحر اللي قدامنا وكمان بيت اللي ضل في هالمخيمات، ما ضلش في حاجه في غزه. انت بتحكي عن 70-80% مشتحين غزه، مسكرين معابر، مسكرين اكل شرب منفس ما حياه اطفال، حتى الاطفال كمان ما لهمش حياه اللي يعيشوها، ضلش فيها تهدد على اي اساس؟ ما انت مش تاع غزه كلها.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, otherwise known as UNRWA, says the famine in Gaza can still be stopped. Warehouses in Jordan and Egypt hold food, medicine and hygiene supplies ready to enter Gaza. UNRWA says Israel must allow aid to prevent further deaths. The famine has been confirmed as entirely man-made by the UN-backed IPC, which warns of a sharp increase in deaths if aid is not delivered immediately. Ross, let's start with, of course, the ongoing and recently commenced operation that has gone on in Gaza City. There's been wide condemnation of the arising humanitarian crisis in the enclave, the fact that Palestinians are being forcibly displaced by leaflets dropped on combat zones, as Israel calls them. Your thoughts on the Israeli military's actions here, whether it's necessary to go into Gaza City despite some of its closest allies' calls, and also, of course, widespread condemnation from within Israel as well?
One thing that myself and other guests here on NewsX have often discussed in recent months is how sensitive is Prime Minister Netanyahu to international criticism. And most of that criticism comes from Europe, and increasingly so from countries that are generally friendly to Israel, like Germany, France, or the United Kingdom. But at least as of the moment, the criticism that's coming from Europe doesn't stop the Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu from ordering the Israeli Defense Forces to pursue this assault on Gaza City and to further occupy the parts of Gaza that the Israeli military hasn't occupied up to now. So definitely there will be international criticism. There will also be domestic criticism as well. But as of the moment, Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't feel that he needs to listen to the criticism, and he's continuing to proceed with the military campaign. Now, another aspect of this, because we're already into a multi-year war, it's going to be almost 2 years since the war started, is why hasn't Israel militarily defeated Hamas? The fact is, they haven't. And that's why Netanyahu feels he still needs to proceed with this campaign, military campaign, into Gaza City.
Ross, let's talk about this damning report that came out around 24 hours ago now. A famine confirmed by the IPC, which is a UN-backed food agency. Israel says that this report is biased. They say that it isn't true. They say that there is no famine in Gaza. Given the visuals and some of the information that comes out from these proclaimed neutral agencies, your thoughts on how this is going to impact Israel's image across the world, and also evidence that Israel has given that some of these organizations, like the United Nations, are in fact biased against the state of Israel itself?
No matter what Israel says, it's clear that civilians in Gaza are suffering from food deprivation. They're simply not getting enough food to eat every day. Now, Israel will say that the reason for that is Hamas is stealing food deliveries. And there is some truth to that. Hamas is a criminal terrorist organization. They do steal food. But Israel is really struggling here because the fact is that the civilians in Gaza are not getting enough food to eat every day. And as I've said here on NewsX before, I do think the Netanyahu government is sensitive to that kind of criticism, whether it comes from European countries, non-government organizations, United Nations affiliated organizations. So Israel is trying to increase the number of trucks that enter into Gaza with food aid, but clearly it's not enough at the moment. But is that going to stop the military campaign? Absolutely not, because Prime Minister Netanyahu has already made a decision. And also, Israel's most important supporter, the United States, is not making an issue of this as well. So Israel feels confident that it's doing what it needs to do, and it doesn't need to do more. Again, I think there is a key issue here, and specifically it's with regard to Israel's relationship with Europe. And I do think that Israel is sensitive to that. And Israel does want to address the complaints that are coming from European governments, and that Israel is trying to find a way to get more aid into Gaza.
Ross Feingold, pleasure as always talking to you. Thank you for taking the time. We now move over to North America, where the Texas Senate has approved a Republican-backed bill to redraw the state's congressional maps. The chamber passed the measure 18-11 on a party line vote after more than 8 hours of debate. The plan, pushed by President Donald Trump, aims to flip 5 Democratic seats to Republicans. It follows approval in the state House on Wednesday and now heads to the Governor Greg Abbott for his signature. Republicans argue the new maps will help the party maintain its slim majority in the U.S. House during next year's midterms. Bill sponsor Senator Phil King said race was never a factor, insisting voting history was the legal and accurate guide. Democrats fiercely oppose the plan. They said it dilutes black and Hispanic voting power and violates federal law. Senator Royce West warned the new map could cut African-American representation in Congress from 4 seats to 2. Democrats vowed to challenge the bill in court. We're now once again joined by Andrew Latham, who's a professor of international relations, and he joins us live from Minnesota. Andrew, as always, thank you very much for speaking to us here on NewsX World. Andrew, there's a lot of anger around this, of course, from the Democratic side. Is their anger warranted?
Not really. It's a bit of the kettle calling the pot black, I think. The Democrats are doing the same thing in California. And that's just the tip of a very big iceberg, to mix metaphors. There's something of a history in the United States in recent decades of polarization around these sorts of issues. States going either more decisively Republican or more decisively Democrat, more blue or more red, as it were, and fewer purple states, which is the lingo here, talking about states that sometimes go Republican, sometimes Democrat. So state legislatures, when they are captured by one party or the other, are being used to redraw the electoral maps so as to guarantee at both the state level and at the federal level that that state will return members of that party. So it's not an ancient story, but it's an old story, and it's one that's being replicated in many states, some Democrat, some Republican.
Could you explain to us how these lines can be redrawn democratically here?
Well, the state legislature has a great deal of latitude across the country, state legislatures. And what they do is, what they tell you that they're trying to do is be fair, make sure that they draw the lines so as to maximize democratic input, so that you don't have all of these constituencies simply, the term is gerrymandered, gerrymandered so as to guarantee that you're returning one party or the other. But what in practice is happening, of course, is gerrymandering. They are redrawing the lines, which they have the authority to do, although it can be challenged in court. They are redrawing the lines of what Americans call electoral districts, constituencies. In Canada, they call ridings, so as to include a majority of voters who have in the past voted for that ruling party. It happens on a fairly regular basis. It's supposed to be kind of extraordinary, and the fact that it's happening at this point in the electoral cycle is a little unusual as well. Not unprecedented, but unusual. And in Texas, it really is partly about capturing, for the Republicans, more and more of the Hispanic vote, which historically has been pro-Democrat, but increasingly, until quite recently, has been drifting very powerfully towards the Republican Party. Although recently under Donald Trump and his undocumented migration policies, he's alienated some of that constituency as well.
Andrew, just briefly, because we're running out of time on this story, how's it looking for Donald Trump and his Republicans going into that 2026 midterm election? Obviously, it's quite early, but what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are that it's not going to go well for the Republicans and Trump, and that seems to be the drumbeat around here. Part of the reason is he is alienating certain key swing constituencies. The Indian American diaspora has lost interest in him increasingly because of his policies vis-a-vis India, and the Hispanic community is divided, but is drifting a little bit back towards the Democratic Party. And then Donald Trump, of course, is unpopular amongst undecideds, amongst Democrats, and even amongst many Republicans these days. So I think in terms of presidential politics, I think that no matter who the Republicans put forward, they're not going to do terribly well.
Andrew, thank you very much for that insight. You are staying with us for further developments. And next we move over to West Africa, where Guinea's junta has suspended 3 major political parties, including that of former President Alpha Condé, for 3 months ahead of a referendum on a revised constitution. The move has sparked protests, with opposition parties accusing General Mamdi Doumbouya of attempting to consolidate power. A referendum scheduled for September the 21st will decide on constitutional changes, but opposition leaders argue it's a power grab. The junta has also postponed the election campaign period, pushing it back to August the 31st. Doumbouya, who seized power in a 2021 coup, has cracked down on opposition and banned demonstrations, while the draft constitution may allow a return to civilian rule, but leaves unclear whether Doumbouya could run in the next presidential election. Andrew, what more can you tell us about this situation coming out of the west of the African continent?
And I think obviously and unambiguously, this is a power grab on the part of Doumbouya. He wants to marginalize or exclude those 3 opposition parties. He's doing so on spurious regulatory grounds. They don't sort of conform to the regulatory standards and whatnot, which may or may not be true. I don't know. But what I do know is, whether it's true or not, this is a pretext that he's using to exclude any organized and potentially serious opposition to him, either now, but especially in the run-up to this referendum.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew Latham, for joining us. Thank you very much for taking the time too. We now move on and move over to the Indo-Pacific, where Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung reaffirmed security cooperation between the 2 neighbors at the Premier's residence in Tokyo. This comes just ahead of Lee's summit with Trump on Monday. This is Lee's first visit to Japan since taking office in June. The South Korean government last week expressed deep disappointment and regret after Japanese officials visited a shrine in Tokyo to Japan's war dead that many Koreans see as a symbol of Japan's wartime aggression. Meanwhile, in Washington, Lee and Trump are expected to discuss security concerns, including China, North Korea, and Seoul's financial contribution for U.S. forces stationed in South Korea. Japan and South Korea also share common ground on trade, with both agreeing to 15% tariffs on U.S. imports of their goods after Trump had threatened steeper duties. Listen in to what Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba and also South Korean President Lee Jae-myung have stated together.
の安定的な関係の発展は両国の利益となるものであり、同時に地域全体の利益にもなるものであります。また、日本、韓国、アメリカ、この連携の強化も非常に重要だと思っております。このような点について、大統領と認識を共有できることはとても喜ばしいことであります。 처음으로 알려져 있는데 그만큼 대한민국이 한일 관계를 중요하게 여기고 있다는 점을 생각해 주시기 바랍니다.
총리께서 지방 균형 발전에 각별한 관심을 가지고 계신 걸로 아는데 다음 셔틀 외교 일환으로 한국을 방문하게 되시면 서울이 아니라 대한민국의 지방에서
We're now joined by Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at the Hudson Institute and he joins us live from Tokyo in Japan. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. Japan and South Korea, Dr. Nagao, historically a complicated relationship, but how can you describe it now and, of course, the importance of it going into these talks for Seoul with President Donald Trump?
Thank you very much for asking. In this case, if we try to understand what is happening, if we use left or right, it is relatively easy to understand. The current South Korea president is left side. And indeed, despite the ruling party of Japan, the LDP is middle right, people believe. Current Prime Minister Ishiba's policy is left, people believe too. So that's why Japan and South Korea, both leaders are left. The concern is US and South Korea. President Trump is, of course, he is representative of right. But South Korea's president is left. So that's why when the South Korea president sworn in, 3 days later, it was the first time the US President Trump called him and celebrate him. But at the same time, in the conversation, the President Trump warned the South Korea President Lee his relation with China. So that's why, in this case, right and left, and not good combination. When we check the history between Japan and South Korea, it's same. In the past, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was representative of right. So that's why that time the South Korea's President Moon was left, and the two leaders are not good relation. So that's why left or right. Left, in this case, good relation. Left and right, this is not good relation. So that's what is happening just now. So after, South Korea's president visit Japan before he visit United States because the US do not want to meet him. So that's why after this negotiation between Japan and the South Korea president will visit United States. What will happening is interesting point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao. Unfortunately, we have run out of time this hour. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Well, unfortunately, that is all that we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.